Well, hello. Thank you for joining us for our online weekend message. Trying to think if there's any announcements. I guess the only two things are Wednesday night we have a prayer house open at 7. We pray it's just kind of quiet, reflective music and scripture that's playing from 7 to about 7:45. Then 7:45 we get together. We pray corporately. It's kind of spread out throughout the room. So if you have any concerns about that, we'd certainly love to see you come join us Wednesday nights at 7. And we had men's breakfast this morning. I think there were 20 guys there again. And so we're in the really beginning process of what does it look like to do men's ministry, women's ministry. That being said, it's going to look different than probably any other church you've been a part of. We really want to resource people and send people out to do small discovery kind of Bible studies. Might be Tuesday morning at Soda Jerk or something in a different place, but we're going to be more of a resource than a traditional hosting of ministries. But we can explain that later. Let's jump into the topic this weekend. There are many, many comforting attributes of God. We say God is forgiving, loving, merciful, gracious, patient. I mean, there's all those attributes of God really are comforting and reassuring to us. But there's one attribute to God that might make us squirm a little bit. And that is the fact that God is righteous and that he is just. It says this in Deuteronomy 32:4. He is a rock. His works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong, upright and just is he. When we say that God is righteous, we're saying that he's right in all he does. He is just. Now, there's other descriptions too that we can't ignore. God has wrath towards our sin. Some people would say that they carry that to say he's wrathful. That gets tricky. I would say that God does hate our sin and he does have anger towards that. But to describe God as wrathful, we have to be tricky. Because then that becomes his kind of overwhelming attribute. God is fair. That kind of tends to downplay his attitude towards sin. It's interesting because in the Bible, justice and righteous are seen as the same. But here, for us, we kind of tend to split those into two kind of different nuanced things. We think righteous. If someone says they're righteous, we think of somebody as being holy or pure. But justice, we kind of equate with punishment. And we shouldn't. The U.S. Department of Justice is more about providing justice for people and seeing that everyone's treated fairly. Now, obviously, that means there's going to be punishment involved, unfortunately. But in the Bible, they saw God as both, doing what was right, just, correct, and fair. They saw him as being righteous and acting justly, and they were kind of one in the same thing. I ran across this definition. You might find it helpful. God's righteousness means that God always acts in accordance with what is right and is himself the final standard of what is right. God's righteousness means that God always acts in accordance with what is right. Can't do wrong. And, get this, is himself the final standard of what is right. This weekend we're talking about the fact that God is righteous and just. And there is a judgment and there is an accountability. And people are going to answer for the things that they've done. We're wrapping up our sermon series on putting steel in your spine, walking tall in a changing culture. And I think you might find a measure of reassurance and comfort when we recognize, this world is not all there is. And the things we might see that are troublesome, the things that might grieve us, also grieve God. And there is an accountability. If this world was all there was, there'd be, I think our frustration might be magnified. But there is a God who is righteous and just. I always think it's important when we have this conversation that we go back again and just focus in a little bit more on this attribute of God and what gives him the ability to be righteous and just and to hold us accountable. And the first one is this, that there is no standard. In that, it's the way that God is. It's not something that he does. God is not beholden to a standard that is outside of him. There are no rules that require him to act. There's no outside rules that require him to act. There are no rules that he must follow. There's no predetermined criteria. He is simply acting like himself. Okay? So I say there's no standard. I mean, there's no standard that God has to follow that is outside of himself. He is the standard. Another interesting thought, if you really want to think about it, is everything good is only good to the degree it conforms to the nature of God. So God's doing what he's doing, and it's born out of his very nature, his very character. He makes no apologies for this one. This is the second one. He makes no apologies for being a God who is righteous and just, with a measure of accountability, of reward and punishment. This is a much easier topic to handle in a seminary classroom than it is with a congregation in a church full of people. And so we need to recognize that, but there is a need. God doesn't apologize for it. In fact, there is a need for balance. If we're going to believe in heaven, we have to believe in hell. And when we get out of balance, it gets us a big problem. In fact, God can't apologize for this because he's perfect. He can't apologize for some part of his character. The next one is this: no hiding. God makes no attempt to hide his anger. He makes no attempt to hide his wrath. He never tries to conceal it. Deuteronomy 32. There is no God besides me. I put to death and I bring to life. I have wounded and I will heal, and no one can deliver out of my hand. I lift my hand to heaven and declare, as surely as I live forever, when I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand grasp it in judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and repay those who hate me. So this isn't like an attribute of God that he just kind of hide. Now, we might not want to make a big deal out of it, and unfortunately a lot of churches in America are kind of diminishing this one. God's got no interest in hiding this aspect of his character. And the fourth one, it's no blemish on God's character. In fact, quite the opposite. Ignoring sin, being indifferent to evil, would be a moral blemish on God's character. So people think, I don't like this part about God. The opposite, ignoring it, would also be a problem. How could God, who loves holiness, purity, and beauty of innocence, tolerate sin and all kinds of evil? How could he view both virtue and vice in the same way? How could God embrace, by tacit acceptance, an ounce of darkness when he is a brilliant light? How could he delight in the pure and not loathe what is contemptible? Nature of God and life itself makes hell as much of a necessity as heaven. So this isn't a blemish. It's not something that we're supposed to be embarrassed about God's character. In fact, the last one is, for this first section, there's no defending. God makes no attempt to defend this part of his character. And it goes back to the definition of the righteousness of God. Defending God's actions is like defending God's character. They are tied together. They're one and the same. God is not and has never been in the habit of defending his character or his actions. Why not? Because defending something sometimes gives credibility to the accusation. Not always. But think about it, even how it plays out in our own life. If I have to defend gravity, then I'm giving credibility to an accusation that there is no gravity. All right, so what does this look like? We could talk about it in theory, but when the rubber hits the road, what does this look like, that God is righteous and just? First off, the good news, and the thing we need to celebrate, is that there is salvation for our sins. Faith in the cross grants us eternal life and forgiveness of sins. So let's look at that and not just focus on the other part of it. Because God is righteous and just, our faith in the cross forgives us of our sins and grants us eternal life with him. Just think about that. That is God following through on his character of being faithful and righteous and just. Then there's also the second one for believers. So for believers, there's salvation, but this is where it gets hard. There's a measure of accountability for believers. I'm going to read two passages to you that were written for Christians to Christians. 2 Corinthians 5:10. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. That's 2 Corinthians 5:10. It's called the Bema Seat judgment. And the second one is from Romans 14:10 through 12. For we are all stand before God's judgment seat. It is written, as surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, every tongue will acknowledge God. So then each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. The context of both of these passages, again, refer to Christians. We refer to it as the judgment seat of Christ, and it involves giving an account for our actions. As I mentioned a moment ago, it's considered the Bema Seat judgment, and the Bema Seat, think about the judge at the Olympics. Winners came before the judge to receive the crowns for first, second, and third place. This is only concerned with Christians' rewards and position in the kingdom, not salvation. The winners are being rewarded or made accountable for what they've done. This has nothing to do with your salvation. This has nothing to do with the forgiveness of your sins. It's a kind of a time of rewarding and accountability. Judgment seat is a single word in the Greek, bema. It's a step, it's a raised platform. It's a seat where the Roman magistrate sat to judge. And in those days, it was an object of reverence and of fear to all the people. So he's saying, it doesn't make sense. How can we be judged for our actions when we're forgiving for our actions? Well, again, it's not about our salvation, but what will be judged. First, what we did, whether we wasted the opportunities, did we just kind of have a very laid-back approach? It makes sense that people should be rewarded when they sacrificed and lived lives that were in more of an obedience. But the second one, this is the one that made me go, ooh. Why did we do what we did? What we did and why we did it. What were our motives? Was it something we wanted to do, or is it something that we had to do? Did we do it begrudgingly? Did we do it to earn God's favor? There are a lot of people who serve God all day long, but maybe they're doing it with the wrong motivation. And God sees that. He sees the heart. If you're just doing something begrudgingly, now I'm not saying there isn't a measure of discipline. If you want to get up and serve God at a food kitchen at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have to set your alarm. You're going to have to set your face and go. So I'm not saying there's not a measure of discipline. But while you're there, if you're not happy that you're there, if you're doing it begrudgingly, if you're doing it because you think, oh, God's happy with me, I am earning God's favor, that's something we need to be aware of. And again, God judges the motives of our heart. And it's a good thing because it really does kind of push back and fights that works righteousness, that I'm going to work my way into righteousness. It is possible to have a saved soul, or saved spirit, if you want to look at it that way, in regards to last week's sermon. You can have a saved life, saved soul, saved spirit, but live an unproductive life. This should inspire us to serve God, but maybe equally or more importantly is to remember why we're serving God. Motives matter. You can do the right things, but for the wrong reasons. 1 Corinthians 13:3. If I give all I possess to the poor and give my body over to hardship that I may boast, but have not love, I gain nothing. God's more concerned about our heart than just what we're doing with our hands. God will still use us and even bring blessings through us, yet in the end, it's as if we did nothing for the Lord. 1 Corinthians 3, 12 through 15 kind of elaborates on this. What we do and the motives are going to be tested by fire, and it'll burn everything that wasn't of him. Their work will be shown for what it is. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved. So again, please don't think it has anything to do with your salvation, because a lot of people fall into that. Whole streams of Christianity have fallen into that. But God does. He is concerned about your motives. He wants to make sure that you are serving him, but that you're serving him with the right motive. Not punished for tainted motives, but not rewarded. Reward. Troubles of life are worth it. We will be rewarded. There's another passage, Hebrews 6:10. God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. So there is a measure of accountability. Reward, but also an accountability of why we're doing what we're doing. So that's for Christians. But this is where it gets a little bit more difficult, for lack of a better word. I'm not saying that to be melodramatic. I'm just trying to stumble for a good word. The world. God is righteous. God is just. How does that impact the world, those people who don't know him? Jesus, excuse me. There's a lot of non-Christians, there's a lot of worldly people who like Jesus because they seem as meek and mild and a teacher with some good things to say. But I don't know how they reconcile that with a passage like Matthew 13, 24 through 30. This is the parable that Jesus gives of the wheat and the tares. Now, a tare is kind of like a weed or an undesirable element. Matthew 13. This is what Jesus has to say. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came in and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Revelation 20, 11 through 15 speaks about a great white throne judgment. When this life is over, we are going to be accountable for our lives. And did we ask Christ to forgive us of our sins? And it seems like we're going to be accountable for what we know. And the more we know, the more we're going to be accountable for. So this is a very real part of reality. And again, our culture has really shied away from this, much to our detriment. And again, balance is so important. A lot of people grew up in a church. I heard it today. Somebody at breakfast said, I think it was somebody said something like, the fire and brimstone kind of preaching and the street preacher preaching. That's one extreme, but the other extreme is just to kind of ignore it or downplay it altogether. The next one. So that's, we're all accountable. The world is going to be accountable. If we want to have steel in our spine, and if you need help with your frustration to know that evil will be punished, it's important to recognize, and again, I take no delight in this, that leaders have a measure of accountability. And maybe, again, it might bring a measure of help to the frustration we might feel as we see the world unfold around us. In the Old Testament, leaders were accountable. Proverbs 16:12. It is an abomination for kings to commit wicked acts, for a throne is established on righteousness. It is an abomination. Boy, that word abomination is a big word, isn't it? That's a heavy word. And leaders need to be aware of their actions. Leading with wickedness is committing an abomination. And the throne is established for righteousness. God sets up leaders, and he desires that they act rightly. Obviously, you can look through the Hebrew history of the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, and see there were good kings and bad kings. And God said this was going to happen when the people claimed they wanted a king so badly. God wanted to be their leader, but we and they rejected him as their leader in so many ways. And one of the results is that he's given us responsibility. But even that being said, there is a measure of accountability. And so and the next one is this, even the Old Testament, woe. We're going to use the word woe. Woe can be translated, what sorrow. Woe to those who say that evil is good and good is evil, that dark is light and light is dark, that bitter is sweet and sweet is bitter. Again, instead of woe, let's use the word what sorrow. What sorrow to those who say that evil is good and good is evil, that dark is light and light is dark, that bitter is sweet and sweet is bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and think themselves so clever. Woe to those who take bribes and let the wicked go free, and they punish the innocent. Woe and great sorrow are due to those who call evil good and good evil. We see that lived out every single day. We see it lived out in a more poignant way each and every day. It's very concerning, disconcerting things going on right now in our government and laws that are being passed and being considered to be passed. And more concerning and maybe alarming. And we as a culture are in danger of really calling evil good and good evil. And the leaders who are promoting this and propagating this on us as a country, there is a measure of accountability. We need to pray for them, but I think we need to have a measure of sorrow for them. What sorrow? It's not just an Old Testament thing. A lot of people have a misconception that God is one way in the Old Testament and another way in the New Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus uses that word woe again. What sorrow? Woe. Woe to the Pharisees. 7 times in Matthew 23. He says woe to the Pharisees. And we might not realize it or think about it, but the Pharisees, in many ways, were the local government. And Jesus has a lot to say to these Pharisees. Matthew 18:6, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Now, I know, before you say anything, I know that this verse is written to Christians, but I can't help but wonder if some principle in there doesn't also apply to our non-Christian leaders. I'm just going to have to let you sit and ponder that. Do the warnings to the Christian leaders apply to the warnings of non-Christian leaders? Go back to the principle of it. Anything that causes us to stumble, whether it's rules that we must follow That was the context that Jesus was talking about. But if you're facilitating and making it easier for other people to sin, Christian or non-Christian, I can't help but think that there's some sort of principle that you can apply there as well. Now, some people say that the church is too political. Other people would say that it's not political enough, not vocal enough. And I don't have a definitive answer for you on that. But I would say this, it's important for the world to know what we are for and not just what we're against. So it's easy for us to kind of make up a sign and march around saying what we're against, but it's also incumbent on us to explain to people what we are for. So God is righteous, God is just, and it's a very, very good thing. And again, I hope, and we need to handle this whole conversation with a measure emphasizing love and care. Be careful when we're having this conversation, when we talk about leaders and people who don't know the Lord and doing great evil, if you want to be so blunt. But there is a righteousness to God that we can't ignore and not just put up with. It's something for us to embrace because it is a good thing that God is righteous and just. We have just 3 questions that I'd consider you to ponder for a moment. How do you feel about this attribute of God? And then why do you feel that way? You might not like it. Maybe you do appreciate it. Maybe you can see the need for standards. Maybe you can see the need for accountability. But if you don't like the attribute of God, why? And I just challenge you, if you don't like it, is it because you're imposing your idea of morality onto God? Just be real about that. If you don't like the attribute, if you don't like the idea that God is righteous and just, if you don't like the idea that there's an accountability for Christians and non-Christians, why not? The next question is, how do you feel about your Bema Seat judgment? And then why do you feel that way? Even as a believer, accept Christ as a 5-year-old in Sunday school, there's still going to be a measure of accountability for how you lived your life. God's given us different opportunities, so he recognizes that. It's not just, the good that you've done. It doesn't get weighed like that. It's, have you made the most out of the opportunities that were available to you? And how did you do with those opportunities? So how do you feel about your own judgment seat, your Bema Seat judgment? And then the last question is, it's not always good to ask yes-no questions. Open-ended questions are better, but here's a yes-no question, because they can be more blunt and succinct too. Do you need more love for the weeds and leaders who do evil? We hopefully are the wheat that's growing up, but we grow up amongst the weeds. And the parable of Jesus says, the weeds are going to be tied up and they're going to be burned, cast into the fire. It just says burned, tie them in the bundles to be burned. Just leave it at that. How do you feel as, hopefully, wheat? How do you feel about the weeds that are growing up around? And then again, even just in respect to the leaders, how do you feel about leaders who do evil? Do you have a measure of compassion or just a disgust and a frustration? And disgust, we should be grieved. I'm not saying we shouldn't grieve, but we need to be careful that our feelings don't bleed over into a lack of honor and hatred. We shouldn't hate. It's easy to hate. We can hate what they do, but we got to be really careful and intentional about not lumping people in with what they do, and not let that become their identity in our eyes. So again, thank you for hanging with us this weekend. Hopefully, it'd be great if you feel comfortable coming on a Wednesday night. It'd be great to see you. Thanks so much. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.